The ubiquity of deep work among influential individuals is important to emphasize because it stands in sharp contrast to the behavior of most modern knowledge workers, a group that's rapidly forgetting the value of going deep. The reason knowledge workers are losing their familiarity with deep work is well established: network tools. This is a broad category that captures communication services like email and SMS, social media networks like Twitter and Facebook, and the shiny tangle of infotainment sites like BuzzFeed and Reddit. In aggregate, the rise of these tools, combined with ubiquitous access to them through smartphones and networked office computers, has fragmented most knowledge workers' attention into slivers. A 2012 McKinsey study found that the average knowledge worker now spends more than 60% of the work week engaged in electronic communication and internet searching, with close to 30% of a worker's time dedicated to reading and answering email alone. This state of fragmented attention cannot accommodate deep work, which requires long periods of uninterrupted thinking. At the same time, however, modern knowledge workers are not loafing. In fact, they report that they are as busy as ever. What explains the discrepancy?
Where's that smile, Phoenix?
A lot can be explained by another type of effort, which provides a counterpart to the idea of deep work. Shallow work. Non-cognitively demanding logistical-style tasks often performed while distracted. These efforts tend to not create much new value in the world and are easy to replicate. In an age of network tools, in other words, knowledge workers increasingly replace deep work with the shallow alternative, constantly sending and receiving email messages like human network routers, with frequent breaks for quick hits of distraction. Larger efforts that would be well served by deep thinking, such as forming a new business strategy or writing an important grant application, get fragmented into distracted dashes that produce muted quality. To make matters worse for depth, there's increasing evidence that this shift toward the shallow is not a choice that can be easily reversed. Spend enough time in a state of frenetic shallowness, and you permanently reduce your capacity to perform deep work. What the net seems to be doing is chipping away my capacity for concentration and contemplation, admitted journalist Nicholas Carr in an oft-cited 2008 Atlantic article. And I'm not the only one. Carr expanded this argument into a book, The Shallows, which became a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. To write The Shallows, appropriately enough, Carr had to move to a cabin and forcibly disconnect.
Reloading.
The idea that network tools are pushing our work from the deep toward the shallow is not new. The Shallows was just the first in a series of recent books to examine the Internet's effect on our brains and work habits. These subsequent titles include William Powers' Hamlet's BlackBerry, John Freeman's The Tyranny of Email, and Alex Soojung Kin Pang's The Distraction Addiction, all of which agree more or less that network tools are distracting us from work that requires unbroken concentration, while simultaneously degrading our capacity to remain focused. Given this existing body of evidence, I will not spend more time in this book trying to establish this point. We can, I hope, stipulate that network tools negatively impact deep work. I'll also sidestep any grand arguments about the long-term societal consequence of this shift, as such arguments tend to open impassable rifts. On one side of the debate are techno-skeptics like Jaron Lanier and John Freeman, who suspect that many of these tools, at least in their current state, damage society. While on the other side, techno-optimists like Clive Thompson argue that they're changing society, for sure, but in ways that'll make us better off. Google, for example, might reduce our memory, but we no longer need good memories, as in the moment we can now search for anything we need to know. I have no stance on this philosophical debate. My interest in this matter, instead, veers toward a thesis of much more pragmatic and individualized interest. Our work culture shift toward the shallow whether you think it's philosophically good or bad, is exposing a massive economic and personal opportunity for the few who recognize the potential of resisting this trend and prioritizing depth. An opportunity that, not too long ago, was leveraged by a bored young consultant from Virginia named Jason Ben. There are many ways to discover that you're not valuable in our economy. For Jason Ben, the lesson was made clear when he realized, not long after taking a job as a financial consultant, that the vast majority of his work responsibilities could be automated by a kludged-together Excel script. The firm that hired Ben produced reports for banks involved in complex deals. It was about as interesting as it sounds, Ben joked in one of our interviews. The report creation process required hours of manual manipulation of data in a series of Excel spreadsheets. When he first arrived, it took Ben up to 6 hours per report to finish this stage. The most efficient veterans at the firm could complete this task in around half the time. This didn't sit well with Ben. The way it was taught to me, the process seemed clunky and manually intensive, Ben recalls. He knew that Excel has a feature called macros that allows users to automate common tasks. Ben read articles on the topic and soon put together a new worksheet, wired up with a series of these macros that could take the 6-hour process of manual data manipulation and replace it, essentially with a button click. A report writing process that originally took him a full workday could now be reduced to less than an hour. Ben is a smart guy. He graduated from an elite college, the University of Virginia, with a degree in economics. And like many in his situation, he had ambitions for his career. It didn't take him long to realize that these ambitions would be thwarted so long as his main professional skills could be captured in an Excel macro. He decided, therefore, he needed to increase his value to the world. After a period of research, Ben reached a conclusion. He would, he declared to his family, quit his job as a human spreadsheet and become a computer programmer. As is often the case with such grand plans, however, there was a hitch. Jason Ben had no idea how to write code. As a computer scientist, I can confirm an obvious point. Programming computers is hard. Most new developers dedicate a 4-year college education to learning the ropes before their first job. And even then, competition for the best spots is fierce. Jason Ben didn't have this time. After his Excel epiphany, he quit his job at the financial firm and moved home to prepare for his next step. His parents were happy he had a plan, but they weren't happy about the idea that this return home might be long-term. Ben needed to learn a hard skill, and needed to do so fast.
Spike down.
It's here that Ben ran into the same problem that holds back many knowledge workers from navigating into more explosive career trajectories. Learning something complex, like computer programming, requires intense, uninterrupted concentration on cognitively demanding concepts. The type of concentration that drove Carl Jung to the woods surrounding Lake Zurich. This task, in other words, is an act of deep work. Most knowledge workers, however, as I argued earlier in this introduction, have lost their ability to perform deep work. Ben was no exception to this trend. I was always getting on the internet and checking my email. I couldn't stop myself. It was a compulsion, Ben said, describing himself during the period leading up to his quitting his finance job. To emphasize his difficulty with depth, Ben told me about a project that a supervisor at the finance firm once brought to him. They wanted me to write a business plan, he explained. Ben didn't know how to write a business plan, so he decided he would find and read 5 different existing plans, comparing and contrasting them to understand what was needed. This was a good idea, but Ben had a problem. I couldn't stay focused. There were days during this period, he now admits, when he spent almost every minute, 98% of my time, surfing the web. The business plan project, a chance to distinguish himself early in his career, fell to the wayside. By the time he quit, Ben was well aware of his difficulties with deep work. So, when he dedicated himself to learning how to code, he knew he had to simultaneously teach his mind how to go deep. His method was drastic but effective. I locked myself in a room with no computer, just textbooks, note cards, and a highlighter. He would highlight the computer programming textbooks, transfer the ideas to note cards, and then practice them out loud. These periods, free from electronic distraction, were hard at first, but Ben gave himself no other option. He had to learn this material, and he made sure there was nothing in that room to distract him. Over time, however, he got better at concentrating, eventually getting to a point where he was regularly clocking 5 or more disconnected hours per day in the room, focused, without distraction, on learning this hard new skill. I probably read something like 18 books on the topic by the time I was done, he recalls. After 2 months locked away studying, Ben attended the notoriously difficult Dev Boot Camp, a 100-hour-a-week crash course in web application programming. While researching the program, Ben found a student with a PhD from Princeton who had described Dev as the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Given both his preparation and his newly honed ability for deep work, Ben excelled. Some people show up not prepared, he said. They can't focus, they can't learn quickly. Only half the students who started the program with Ben ended up graduating on time.
No more doubts.
Ben not only graduated, but was also the top student in his class. The deep work paid off. Ben quickly landed a job as a developer at a San Francisco tech startup with $25 million in venture funding and its pick of employees. When Ben quit his job as a financial consultant only half a year earlier, he was making $40,000 a year. His new job as a computer developer paid $100,000, an amount that can continue to grow, essentially without limit in the Silicon Valley market, along with his skill level. When I last spoke with Ben, he was thriving in his new position. A newfound devotee of deep work, he rented an apartment across the street from his office, allowing him to show up early in the morning before anyone else arrived and work without distraction. On good days, I can get in 4 hours of focus before the first meeting, he told me. Then maybe another 3 to 4 hours in the afternoon. And I do mean focus. No email, no hacker news, a website popular among tech types. Just programming.
One enemy remaining.
For someone who admitted to sometimes spending up to 98% of his day in his old job surfing the web, Jason Ben's transformation is nothing short of astonishing. Jason Ben's story highlights a crucial lesson. Deep work is not some nostalgic affectation of writers and early 20th century philosophers.